Alright, next up is Emma Watson. This is one that I've seen a lot of people have been, they've been a little troubled, a little uncertain about this one. But I will say that this person does not appear to be female to me, biologically female. You know, just looking at the child's face, I feel there is a distinctly male presence to this person. Speaking about the physical traits, there does appear to be a little bit of a brow ridge. There does appear to be wider spacing between the eyes, also wider spacing between the nose and the mouth. Just kind of a broadness to the face, as well as less kind of fat and softness in the face compared to the supposedly male co-stars of the films. The brow is also quite long, which is more common on males, though this can also just be a feature of a different population, or a feature that kind of varies just from individual to individual. Now, if you notice, the back is completely straight. There's no curving going on around the hips. The front of the body looks to be straight. There's no pelvic tilt. There's no spinal arch. That's not correct for a female. A female of this age already should have those traits, those features. I'm sure people recall the scene where Hermione slugs Draco in these films. And again, that's just another kind of feature of the vast TransAgenda, which is trying to change, you know, gender expectations and the way that we perceive to be the correct kind of natural way for people of different genders to behave. And one of the things that's largely promoted in the media is aggressive, violent females. It's in many, many films now, whereas I believe that the natural inclination of a female is not really violent, which makes sense because females on average have lower testosterone levels than males, which, you know, testosterone is linked with aggression, and so I think it's quite obvious that generally females are not as aggressive as males. Now the brow does look very, it's actually quite bulky, hefty. It's more of a rounded, straight shape, not a kind of sloped shape, but this trait, this feature does vary very much depending on ancestry. You know, traits of the skull, they can vary between different populations, and so when people go into transvestigation and say the sloping brow means it's male and a flat brow means it's female, that's not good enough, because different populations have different traits on their skulls, and unless you're very familiar with these different populations and also know the precise ancestry of the person you're investigating, that's very dangerous. But the thing that is the same between all populations is the primary skeletal markers indicating gender, which are related to childbearing, and that would be the spinal arch and the pelvic tilt of a female, as well as the equal or about equal hip and shoulder ratio on a female. The Q angle of a female, which is acute, angles inward from the hips down to the knee. Those traits are required for childbearing, and they are coded in DNA. They're not altered by taking hormones. Hormones alters the flesh, can do things to change the skull. Taking hormone blockers can change the density of the bones on a male especially. But above all, it won't change the structure coded for in DNA, because the body is aware of what its chromosomes are programming it for. Are you programmed to bear children, or are you programmed to be more of a hunter and protector? That's, you know, the difference there. There's just such a male energy in this person, young and older, more development in the throat even at this young age than you seem to see on Rupert and Daniel when they're older. Kind of stronger bone structure, even though it's a small person at this age. You know, it looks like the pelvis is small, the legs are straight. Kind of more of a strength to the jaw, even though it's a kind of pretty, more dainty face. But this is young, so we'll see what happens as the person ages. Look how small the pelvis is compared to the shoulders. The shoulders are square, and the pelvis is very small. The legs appear to spring out from a point that's closer together, which is more typical of a male pelvis. There isn't a female Q angle. The legs just come straight down, there's no curving on either side. this is a male Q angle. This is a male. It looks like the shoulders maybe in this shot are being held up as well, so the arms may not appear as long. But arm length also varies from person to person. The torso appears to be quite long though, compared to the legs, and usually on females they'll have proportionally longer legs than torsos. The neck appears, fairly long, pretty strong looking. The person does have a widow's peak, but again, this feature varies depending on the population. Obviously a highly doctored photo, but what they didn't do is alter it so that there was a female spinal arch, because the spine comes down straight until right here, where there's just the minimal curve of the male posterior. The front of the legs are totally straight, there's no female curving on the legs, and the front of the body notably lacks a female pelvic tilt. A lot of strength in the jaw, quite a strong brow too. Now this bit here, I pointed this out before on videos that are talking about MTFs, is this amount of flesh that kind of bulges out when MTFs will just walk. It's different from on females, because on females we have, if we're slim like this, then our bone structure matches, like the flesh on top of the bones, it matches where the bones are, and so it doesn't kind of do these things. But you can always tell there's just this kind of flesh sitting on top of a smaller bone structure on MTFs, because when they take estrogen, it reprograms their body to have more of a female fat distribution, but then it's obvious that it doesn't match the bone structure. Now notice kind of how broad the shoulders look. They look quite broad, and they are definitely wider than the pelvis. It's a small pelvis, the legs spring up from a point close together, the legs are totally straight. That's a male Q angle. More development in the neck really than you see on even these ones who are taking testosterone. This one has the curvy legs, this one's wearing really baggy trousers so you can't really tell what's going on. But on this person, it does look like a very kind of long, straight, thin torso. It's very, very masculine looking. There's really not much fat in this person's face, whereas on the other two, they have much more fat in the face, and this is more typical of females. The maturity feature of females is more fat in the face, whereas males will lose what's called baby fat in the face typically, and when they are thin, they tend to have more of a chiseled kind of face like this. This person has a very kind of pretty face, so it may be easier to believe this person is a female than some. And depending on the shot that you get of a person, this is why you have to look at a lot of shots and you have to look at people in motion, because if they were doing this without the intent to deceive, they would just tell everyone what they were. But they don't do that. Sometimes there's coded disclosures and things, but people who aren't awake aren't going to notice that. Anyway, in this shot, you could look at this and say, oh, that looks like a female Q angle, doesn't it? Well, first of all, let's just talk about how the hips up here are not curved. There's a very narrow kind of shape here at the pelvis. The torso appears to be just very long and square. The shoulders are very big. The shoulders are still bigger than the pelvis, even when it looks like there's that female Q angle here. Quite a lot going on in the neck as well. But then notably, when you get another angle, you very, very obviously see that this is not a female. See just the fat that's only right here. It's not above here. There's just the thin pelvis up here, the narrow male pelvis. The legs are close together. There's straightness along the whole inside of the leg here. So you can see, this is again, it's a male Q angle, and the legs step side by side. Shoulders are bigger than the hips. Here there's a lot of mass in the upper body, just the shoulders look very large. There's no tilt to the pelvis, this body is just straight at the front. And where you have the curve of the hips here, look how low it is. It's much too low. This is not natural looking on a female. This is also an angle that you often see people photographing the MTFs at, because it will make the hips appear as wide as possible on an MTF. Whereas on a natural female, if you see them from the front, their hips will look wide. It's just something about this angle catches it better on natural males than on MTFs. Notice how the front of the body is completely flat. There is no curve to the lower body here, which would indicate a female pelvic tilt. There is an Adonis belt, and I have yet to see a female who is not a bodybuilder who has an Adonis belt. I've known people who were severely emaciated as people with eating disorders, and they never even had an Adonis belt. They had a very low percentage of body fat, as low as you can get without dying. Even then, didn't have an Adonis belt. And yet I've also seen men who are kind of a bit overweight who have an Adonis belt, so while it's not something that's just restricted to the Y chromosome, it's possible for FTMs to have it, and it's possible for natural females to develop it with a lot of bodybuilding and hormones. I don't think it's possible for a female who's not on hormones to develop one. I've never seen it. Again, we're looking from this angle, this 3/4 angle. Something a bit strange looking about the waist. Also just about the kind of hip region. This look here, typically you won't see females with legs and posterior like this. Just essentially the entire curve of the person is just off. It's not correct. If you see them from the front, looks like the rib cage is small. Possible that this person does corset training. Look how low the waist appears to be. On this side it looks a bit higher because of the leg stepping, but just appears to be pretty low for a female. It's very strange. Shoulders are very square and broad, the neck is very long, the arms hang down. You know, the legs spring out from a point close together, they're just very straight. This is not a female Q angle. This is not a female body. You know, if you just kind of fill in this little gap here, where the rib cage appears to be a bit compressed, if you fill it in. Also, there is something a bit weird looking about right here, I'm not sure. The knees point straight forward, the legs point straight forward, but they're stepping on both sides of the line like a male. Very interesting. I'm not sure who this person is, I guess it's a boyfriend of some kind. But look how wide this one's pelvis is. See how this one is angling the feet way outward, pointing the toes way outward. This one potentially could be an FTM with the really sloping looking shoulders, the high waist, the wide pelvis, all the mass down here. And Emma Watson is doing more of a catwalk in this shot. This catwalk is designed to confuse people about the Q angle, because when they cross the legs one in front of the other, it creates more of a female Q angle, appearance-wise. But again, there's just this bit of flesh right here. Doesn't curve gradually. There's something very strange and off about this figure. And look at this. Look at that straight back all the way down. There is no arch up here where a female's arch should begin, because that's not where the waist is. The waist is down here because it's a male. It's just a very straight looking body. This is a prepubescent boy put on estrogen. Again, look at that. The totally straight male spine. That is a very male spine. Legs posterior look much more male than female. Again, totally straight front of the body. There is no pelvic tilt on this person. Interesting, this one does seem to have more of a curve to the front of the abdomen, to the lower back. Interesting indeed. There's no roundness on these hips. They're just very straight. A lot of times the MTFs will kind of slouch their shoulders forward, because when they do that it makes the upper back look more curved, so they try and approximate a female spinal arch through that and through posing. But this is not a female spine, just vaguely bends, but male spines do bend just a little bit. MTFs that are transgendered prepubescently are put on hormone blockers and then later put onto estrogen. They often have less dense, broad bone structures because if they're not allowed to develop as a male, then they don't develop that way. And they often do yoga, and they're often very flexible as a result. Estrogen also increases laxity in the joints, so it increases flexibility. So that's why you often see MTFs who are good at approximating a spinal arch, even when naturally they don't have it. But here, this obviously is someone without pelvic tilts, and without a female spinal arch. Down low at the ankles, it gets thinner again. Generally on females there'll just be more of a gradual curve all the way down to the ankle, but on males there'll be a point where it gets thinner. This is because of lower subcutaneous fat levels in males. Very sharp, cut-looking jaw. Again, this is because of lower subcutaneous fat levels in males as well as stronger male bone structure. This doesn't look like a female. The mass is all up in the upper body, back. There's this little bulge here, the collarbone, that generally I see in males, not in all males, but I've never seen it yet in a female, so I believe it's just the way the collarbones lie differently in the shoulders of a male. Look at how straight that body is. There is no spinal arch, completely straight back. If you fill in this gap here, you see this is just the long rectangular body of a male. Male looking posterior, male looking legs, totally straight legs. There is no female Q angle. Depending on the shot, in some angles they also will try and pose, so it looks like they have more of a spinal arch and more of a Q angle and more of a pelvic tilt, but obviously they don't. This person has a straight body, front and back. It's not a female. Again, that waist is just too low. The ribcage is pretty small, but you know, the body, the torso is very rectangular. Kind of slinky, tubular, male body. Totally straight legs, narrow hips, arms that hang down. Wider dental arch on this one, longer forehead on this one than on this one, even though this is supposedly the boy of the two. This is her brother, Alexander. Again, straight legs on her. Again, the brow on the sister is longer than the brow on the brother. Generally, it's the opposite. The features on the brother are smaller, closer spaced. Generally, it's the opposite. The jaw is narrower on the brother than on the sister. Generally, it's the opposite. The mouth is smaller, not as wide on the brother than on the sister. The hips are considerably wider on the brother than on the sister, and I don't think I have to tell anyone that's not normal. Look at that, just look at the mass, the width of these hips compared to on the sister, where the pelvis is small. The legs are totally straight on this one. Shoulders are big on this one. This face looks softer than on this one. It's a gentle look in the eyes, this one. Lips are even sized, the mouth is small, delicate, chin's delicate, curve of the jawline, softness in the face, and what looks like a high point where the waist comes in, the small female angled ribcage and a bit of a curve in the back. Interesting. Small, kind of shrunken in chest with unusual pointing, bunching that you don't see on natural males. High points where the waist comes in. Strange look to the obliques. Don't see that kind of look on males. Fullness right here. Just a very soft, female looking face. Female looking energy. Interesting. Again, really strange look to the torso. What's going on with this whole section here? This doesn't look like on natural males. It's like it's kind of, this section here is crunching up into where on a natural male you'd actually have a long, sizable torso. Trousers worn really low. Lots of width and mass down here. More than up here. Again, these curvy, wide hips. Shoulder pads, you know, but just such a smooth looking face. No sharpness to the bones or anything like you see on Emma. More of a round shape to the forehead, even though both of them have large foreheads. This one is kind of rounder. Curvy jaw. Interesting facial hair development. Seems like it's a bit difficult. Maybe it's because of the ancestry. Maybe it's because it's a girl. Just look at that. That's so obviously the female of the two of them. Barely anything here. Again, the weird look up here. Weird look here. Something very strange going on with his body. Shorter neck. Very delicate bones. I don't know what's with celebrities and always having weird, you know, photo shoots and things with their siblings, but anyway. Again, this is the one with the softness in the face. This is the one with all the sharpness. This is the one with the kind of wider looking eyes. Generally males will have wider looking eyes because they have more going on in the brow ridges and the forehead, so that means their eyes are wider open. Again, this person's upper body looks smaller than lower body, whereas this person has long tubular body until something going on with the legs. Now as for digit ratio, there are females who have what we call a male digit ratio, and there are males who have a female digit ratio, but that's pretty uncommon. It's not the best measure, but it does look like this person may have a male digit ratio. This person has a very male energy when you watch them in, you know, a lot of interviews and things like that. They're very, I think they've been instructed very well on how to come across as sort of more sophisticated and feminine in certain ways, but there's just that concentrated male energy nevertheless. And of course, wearing a corset, obviously the shoulders are wider than the hips. Again, there's just that little bulge of flesh right there, but the actual legs are very straight on the inside, on the outside. Just that's a male Q angle right there. A lot of MTFs do corset training. They train the body so that when they're not wearing the corset, it can retain the same form for many hours. I think up to 7 hours or something like that. Would have to check again, but in any case, it's several hours. And Emma Watson is definitely not the only one who's done that. But just look at how massive the chest looks right above it, you know? And it's not the presence of a female chest or anything. There's really not much of that there. There's not much of a bosom. Yes, but the shoulders are wider than the hips. It does look like the arm length is generally closer to male. Torso is just really long. They know how to do the catwalk, you know. Pretty much every MTF celebrity knows how. But isn't that really strange that the one that's walking with them has a higher waist indentation point and has wide, curvy hips too? Looks like this one has a female Q angle. That's very odd. This one is walking with the knees angled way out to the other side. Same with the feet. This one looks like it's doing the FTM walk. This one looks like it's doing the MTF walk. Both trying to disguise their natural Q angle. Again, straight body, back and front. These shoulders, those are way too big, and it's not built up deltoids, this is just the skeletal structure. It's definitely not normal for a female. And this is the look of a body that uses a corset, because on females, we have a small ribcage that's angled in, but it doesn't look too small compared to the shoulders. That's the difference between the MTFs who get a small ribcage by using corsets and natural females, is that on the MTFs, the shoulders just look disproportionate with the size of the ribcage. So that's very interesting. Looks like the elbows are above the natural waist. Generally on females they'll kind of fit into that gap or just be a little bit below it. But on MTFs often the waist will be below where the elbow goes. And again, the shoulders are very square, broad, larger than the legs, and when they're not doing the catwalk, it's very obvious this person just walks like a male, legs side by side, totally straight legs. This one's also been quite a proponent in the androgynous factor of the transgender. Again, male legs, just the look of the throat, the large trachea, the square, strong-looking shoulders, even though it's a slim man. I'm sure people remember this person receiving the Best Actor award, the gender-neutral actor award. Watson described the award as very meaningful. So not separating nominees based on their sex says something about how we perceive the human experience. How we perceive the human experience. Do we perceive the human experience as something restricted to two genders? That doesn't need to be separated into two different categories. You know, even though biology separates us into two different categories. Again, this is a corset trained body. This is not a natural female body. This is very unnatural looking. The waist is too low, it's below the elbows. The shoulders are too wide for this ribcage, the shape it's got. The pelvis is too narrow. Look how tiny this pelvis is compared to the shoulders. This is not a childbearing pelvis. You can again see it looks like there's just that little bit of the Adonis belt going on here. The legs are totally straight. This is a male Q angle. The arms hang down closer to male length. Might be some discoloration on the hands too, which sometimes happens with taking hormones. This is obviously not a correct female body. Look at that. This is, if you just fill in where the torso has been compressed through corset training, if you just fill it in, it's completely, this is a tubular, square male body. This is not a female body. This is obviously a male posterior. There's no curve to these hips. I'm talking about at a skeletal level too. Females can be very thin. Females can be as thin as they can be before they die. But they're still always going to have more curve at a skeletal level than what we see here. This back is completely straight. These hips are narrow. And yet the shoulders are broad. This is not a female. Look at those shoulders. Look at those legs. The little bulge there, but the rest of the leg. You know, and that bulge, if you just learn to see what's going on above there, there's inclines. That's not a female pelvis. There's no space for a baby in there. Again, look how much bigger the shoulder is than the pelvis. It's obviously wider. Just takes one glance to see that. There's no space for the baby to emerge here. This is not someone who can give birth. Therefore, they do not have XX chromosomes. They have a Y chromosome. Look at that back. Straight, 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 all the way until right here, right above the little male posterior. Just look at the face. Look at the male energy in the face. Squareness, the sharpness of the jaw. It's a pretty man, but it's a man. This is not a woman. And look at that energy. That intense, focused, piercing energy. That is not a female. So, Emma Watson is a male to female transgender, and that's that.